And no, we're not clean up your mess. I mean, clean up your mess. The real reason is Europe has nothing to send. Are they going to send the great European fleet? No. So, yeah, but Trump got mad and he basically said that I'm withdrawing troops from Germany. And he announced the withdrawal of 5,500 troops. And there was some confusion at the time. What did this mean? Where were the troops coming from? Well, it turns out the troops in question, about 4,000 or some odd of them, are coming from what is the Second Cavalry Brigade. It's the last armored brigade that the United States has stationed in Germany. I remember growing up as a kid. We had two and a half corps worth of military there, and we had equipment for more to come in. The concept of just one brigade. First of all, we didn't deal with brigades back then. I think we dealt with regiments. But either way, the cavalry regiment is a striker regiment, which is light armor, zero survivability in a modern war, but it's there. And basically, that regiment, Second Cavalry Regiment, has been put on notice that it's going to be leaving Germany. Now, it hasn't left Germany yet. In fact, this summer it did a full range of exercises with other NATO members, but it's targeted to be withdrawn. There was supposed to be a field artillery, a 3rd Battalion, 14th Field Artillery Regiment, which is a long range precision strike battalion, meaning that their job is to provide long range fire support for the supported units. In this case, which would be all of the American military ground combat forces in Europe. These remember the Dark Eagle,
Yes.
the hypersonic thing that we promised. Biden promised the Germans we're going to deploy this in 2024. He said we're going to have it there by 2026. Well, it's 2026, and they said no, we're not deploying this either. That's because they stood up this battalion in December of 2025, and here in Fort Drum, New York. And it's supposed to have been getting ready for a deployment this year, and so families have not done anything. Like, you don't buy houses, you let leases expire. Troops begin to send advance parties to Germany to scout out where they're going to put the unit and all this stuff. And suddenly they said, no, you're not deploying. Now, the reason why they weren't deploying isn't just because of Trump's hissy fit. It's because the battalion has 3 primary sources of firepower. The first is HIMARS, which everybody should be familiar with because of what goes on in Ukraine. And gosh, if you remember this last phase of the American war against Iran, we were firing a lot of HIMARS out of Bahrain and Kuwait into, I think Qatar even, into Iran. Now, so we obviously have HIMARS, but the problem is this is a long-range precision strike thing. So there's a missile called the Precision Strike Missile that's supposed to be assigned to this unit. We are down to less than 90 of these missiles worldwide. Now we have 3, and there's 3 batteries. Each one has 3 launchers. Each launcher has 2 missiles. Now I'm just a simple guy, but that's 9, 18, 27 just for the basic load. Then you want to reload. That takes you to 54. And that's just basically your first hour's worth of combat. And so the reality was, why are we sending this unit to Germany when we have no missiles for it? None whatsoever. And all the missiles are actually allocated for other things. So that's that. Now there's a mid-range component for them that called the Typhoon. The Typhoon is basically a containerized system that fires the SM-6, which is a Navy surface-to-air missile that also has a surface-to-surface missile capability, and the Tomahawk missile that can fire both. And the problem is, we have these, but we don't have any for this unit, and none are ready for this unit. And we don't have any more Tomahawks, and we don't have enough SM-6s because we haven't produced enough. So we don't have that capability. And then there's the Dark Eagle, the big boy of the bunch. We have the launchers. They've built the launchers. But we don't have any missiles. They haven't even begun building the missiles yet. The first ones that are built are going to different units, but they're built as individual missiles. They're not in serial production because each missile that's built is being modified to make up for deficiencies found in the previous missile. So we have no Dark Eagles to deploy. So the bottom line is we're not deploying a battalion that wasn't ready to be deployed anyways. But welcome to the United States military, because this is the reality of everything. Now, this leaves in Germany, which used to have 300,000 American troops stationed there, it leaves a force of around 34, maybe 31,000. People go, well, that's a lot. But of that 31,000, there's like no real combat capability. We have a battalion, an infantry battalion, that's stationed at the Hohenfels training area, but it's an Op 4 battalion, opposing forces battalion. So it's configured to play the enemy during training exercises. They're not a frontline combat unit. So scratch them off. Now we're left with one battalion that's an airborne battalion, part of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and they have a field artillery regiment, which is our battalion, that is the battalion for the brigade. They're stationed in Germany as well. But this is light infantry, paratroopers. They have zero survivability in modern warfare, and their artillery unit is not mobile at all. So basically, the United States has nothing in Germany right now. We have zero capacity to wage war. We have no capacity to influence any military operation whatsoever. We do have a heavy brigade that rotates through. No, we don't, because Trump canceled that. So in the United States, when we have people talking about American, military might backing up NATO, that, Article 5. Remember, Article 5, first of all, it doesn't require any military intervention. It does say that people will consider this. But let's say the United States considers it, because this relates to another story that's being bandied about Ratcliffe going to Moscow and giving them a stern warning, which never happened. A stern warning about what? Because the rumor is that Russia was planning to invade the Baltics, and he's giving them a stern warning. Russia's not planning on invading the Baltics, and no stern warning was given. But let's just play with this for a while. A stern warning for what? That America's military might in Europe is going to increase? I mean, so if it did, it would literally be the charge of the paper tiger. I mean, so if Russia came in and NATO went, oh my God, here come the Russians, Article 5, America, and America goes, here we come, rally the boys, guys, here we go, it would be the charge of the paper tiger brigade, because there's nothing in Europe at all. We have no military power, none. Even the heavy armor brigade, they did an exercise recently where they went up against a handful of Ukrainian drone operators, and the Ukrainians wiped them out 3 times. 3 times the brigade had to be brought back to life. And by the 4th time it came around, they went, we're done. We need to relearn how we do everything. And that's the thing. Even if we had the troops, the way we fight war right now is non-survivable on the modern battlefield, especially the European battlefield as defined by the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. If an American combat unit went up against the Russians would wipe this unit out on day one. Day one, because we don't know how to fight in a drone environment. We still come in thinking we're going to do a tank wedge, and we're going to do a sweeping line, and we're going to have tanks in depth and fire support, and we're going to array our artillery battalions behind doctrinally to do this, and infantry is going to dismount from their armored fighting vehicles and charge forward. And what we don't realize is before we even get to the assembly point, a wave of drones are going to come and go boom, 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 you're all dead. And that's it. So that's why I wrote it, because I just think it's important for people to understand that when we're talking about Article 5 and America's military might, we have no military might. None, ladies and gentlemen, none, nothing, zero. It's all dead. These are dead men walking, every single one of them, should we employ them in modern warfare. Even if they had the trained tactics, there's not enough of them. Guys, this is high-intensity conflict. You're going to lose a brigade under best circumstances in 3 days. We're going to cycle through a brigade every 3 days, even if we knew how to fight. And we don't know how to fight. We don't have enough brigades. So people need to stop thinking that NATO intervention would be a good thing, because the weakest link is the one that everybody's looking to, the United States. We've got nothing, ladies and gentlemen, nothing.
Yeah, they're still talking about Zelensky and the rest of it. America provides security guarantees. With what? You know what I mean? I don't know if they've been paying attention. We just lost a war. Really lopsided war. Kind of bad. And there's one thing worse than beating a person up, and that's exposing that they can't fight, right? Because everybody else can beat them up. We got no. I'll put it like this. I had talked to Scott Ritter for years, and Scott Ritter told me about the Patriot system and how he had worked with it and he had evaluated it, and it was a lump of crap. And we watched it in action against Iranian missiles, and it was worse. If anything, you didn't say how bad it was. It was worse than you told us, right? We saw Patriot missiles literally go whoop, and right back down and drop on themselves.
But to be fair, I did tell everybody about the first night of the Gulf War when I bravely climbed on top of my barracks. It's a house in a converted village, Escott Village. But I got on the roof to watch the incoming Scuds because, my God, I was the Scud guy and I wanted to see Scuds in action. So I climb up on the roof and I'm in my full chemical weapons gear because, hey, they might have chemical weapons. And you're watching the Scud go by. You're like, wow, Scud. All of a sudden, boom! What I didn't realize is literally about 100 yards behind me was a Patriot battery. And boom, boom, boom! I'm like, damn. The Patriot missile comes, it takes off like this, and then comes screaming over my head because to intercept something that's going faster than it's programmed to intercept, it can't, normally, if you're coming in like this, it's going to do a modified S shape.
Right.
It fires, and then it's going to detect your trajectory and do a modified S to get the intercept. But now it fires, and this thing's going faster. So it does a really modified S. It literally dives down to get the S back up. But the problem is, the dive down, it blew up in the field right next to me. Boom, boom! And you're like, damn, we're shelling ourselves. But welcome to the reality of the Patriot. The Patriot missile sucks.
Yeah. And so that's one other thing. Not only do we not have the ground forces and the capabilities on the ground, the numbers and the training and all of that, if we were to send them out, they'd have no air defense. So you'd send people out who don't have the weapons they need to protect themselves, don't have the numbers they need to fight, don't have the training for modern warfare with no air defense. So all of this business that people are still saying, yes, we might do a ground invasion is coming, a ground. And I'm like, I do not see any way that could happen. It would be over in hours and not in a good way for the U.S., in my opinion, Scott.
The Russian ground invasion of the Baltics?
No, I mean American ground invasion of Iran. Oh. The Straits of Hormuz. Yeah, they're putting together a ground force to take the Straits of Hormuz.
No, they're not. Again, you're talking to somebody who actually helped plan a amphibious invasion of Iran. 1985. We were tasked with seizing Chabahar and then seizing Bandar Abbas. Why? Because under our scenario, the Soviets were making a move to capture Iran, to take their warm water ports, and they were coming in from Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and from Afghanistan, the 40th Army. And the Afghan one was the biggest threat because it could literally cut through and take a left-hand hook and be in Chabahar. There was a couple mountain ranges. So our job was to seize the port, project power ashore, go take the mountain passes and hold the mountain passes against the Soviets while we built up power ashore. The invasion at that time, 60 to 80,000 Marines, and then around 140,000 soldiers at that time, Army. And we had the forces earmarked for this. It's not like we had to make them up. They existed, and we had the equipment, and we had the ability to get the equipment in the suit. We could do this, but it required, the forcible entry into Iran. We don't have forcible entry capacity anymore. I'm talking about back then, we would be putting a division ashore, with at least 2 brigades online, doing the amphibious assault. And then punching in with another division, a core element, core headquarters, and this was war. Then the Army would come in with even more. And when I talk about this, it's not just the troops, but the sustainability. We had all the ammunition, all the fuel, everything, all the food. that needed to support this. We had it all, and our job was to seize the port, push it ashore. So I have an idea what it takes to do something like this. I can tell you right now, we don't, in the entire U.S. military today, I'll make that one more time. In the entire U.S. military today, we don't have the capacity to do what we're trying to do in 1985, or at least prepared to do. We couldn't invade Iran even if we wanted to. I'll say it again, just so I understand, because I saw a comment in there. He said, I expected Scott to say nice things about America because I thought he was a patriot. A patriot tells the truth. A patriot doesn't lie. If I hated my country, I'd be saying things like, invade Iran, so that the Marines and the soldiers could get slaughtered on the beach. But because I am a professional patriot, I make sure that I'm honest about what's going on. I'm just here to tell you right now, just so everyone understands, we don't have the capacity today in the totality of the United States military to do an invasion of Iran, nor would we be able to generate the strength to do it. Even if we mobilized the reserves and the National Guard and everything, we couldn't do it. Because understand that even as we push into Iran, we still have to maintain residual forces that are capable of reinforcing the 39,000 troops we have in South Korea and reinforcing the 34,000 troops we have in Germany. You know, we can't just take everything, but even if we took everything, we can't do it. We don't have the ability to do it. We don't have the logistical support infrastructure. We don't have anything. We don't have the combat forces. It takes us 5 months to get a U.S. Army heavy brigade ready to be deployed from the United States to Europe under peacetime conditions. Now, we're going to need, a dozen Army heavy brigades to go into Iran. How are we getting them there, ladies and gentlemen? What shipping is going to get them there? We don't have it. And when we get them there in the shipping, because it's not amphibious assault shipping, what port are they going to land in? Because I don't think the Iranians, with their ballistic missile supremacy, are going to sit there and say, yeah, go ahead, land them in the port. We won't fire any missiles at you. All those ships will be sunk before they got to the port. So all the tanks that are on board will be underwater. Please, please, please stop pretending we have military capacity today. We don't. Iran is stronger today than they were in 1985 by orders of magnitude. And remember, Iran will be operating what's called interior lines of communication. It's just a basic military concept, but it means they're at home. They're the home team. And so when they want to go out and buy a hot dog, get some popcorn and a soda, they just have to walk down the street, and there's the hot dog vendor, the soda vendor, and the popcorn vendor. When we want hot dog, popcorn, and a soda, we got to go all the way back to the United States and get it and have it brought out to us. And as we saw with the Abraham Lincoln, that sometimes doesn't work. We can't even support one carrier battle group logistically, and you're telling me that you want to invade Iran with a force of at least 900,000 up to 1.2 million would be required, and we're supposed to support them. Ladies and gentlemen, our military is broke, flat out broke. Every aspect of it's broke. It's a lot of flash and no substance. And sadly, I can say that about the Marine Corps too. We have battalion landing teams that can do battalion landing team type missions. But if you think for a second, a battalion landing team can, make miracles happen. No, they're just Marines. They're flesh and blood. And as the Iwo Jima Memorial shows, when you put Marines on the beach and there's heavy enemy fire, Marines die. They die by the bushelful. So as a good patriot, I don't want my Marines to die, especially needlessly. Now, if they need to die, I'll be more than happy to lead them in combat. I spent a lot of years prepared to do just that. But, a patriot wants to make sure that when we send the Marines into combat, that it's a mission that is worth the sacrifice that we're asking them to make, and B, it's a mission that can be accomplished with the resources that we possess. And right now, we have zero military capacity to do anything of substance.
Anybody who makes those statements doesn't even understand the basics of modern warfare because of long-range strike capabilities. The idea of assembling hundreds of thousands and millions of troops. That's not going to happen. If we said, okay, we're coming into, we're going to all come to confront Russia and Ukraine. We're going to send hundreds of thousands into our bases in Romania. As soon as you started and the Russians realized, oh, they're bringing people in, those bases would be turned to, rubble. If Iran knew, oh, they're assembling hundreds of thousands of people, they're going to invade us, the ports, the assembly points, they may wait for you to get your troops there and get everything set up so they can turn it to rubble. So the long-range strike capability and drone capability now has changed the concept of modern war. Bring in a bunch of guys. We're going to put a column of tanks 10 miles long, and then we're going to go forward. Those days are over. Modern warfare can't even go like that anymore because of the capacity that nations, even let's say the Houthis, have to attack your assembly points, to attack whatever very, very early. Even the Houthis are what? Look at the struggle we had with the Houthis. Why? Long-range strike capability and drone capability has changed the ability to do an aggressive warfare and go to other parts of the world and challenge somebody in their own area.
Yeah, no, let's look at Ukraine for just a second. If you remember in 2022, 2023, big push to get tanks sent there. Send them tanks! Lots of tanks! We need tanks! And then in June of 2023, the Ukrainians decided they were going to send all their tanks and armored fighting vehicles into a massive offensive outside of Robotyno. They were slaughtered by the Russians. And this is before the Russians even perfected drone warfare. The Russians are still getting them with just basically, infantry, armor ambushes done in depth. This is before drones. Today, the tanks right now, all these new, Leopard 4s that they got, they're like the best tank in the world. I mean, my God, they're Leopards. They're German tanks. Many of them have sat in the same place now for 2 years because they can't move. They got them hidden in the woods with camouflage netting over them, but if they move them, even if you start an engine, understand the Russians are sitting up there with a big old drone that's looking down, and you start the engine, and it goes, the black and the gray smoke comes out, and the Russians go, ooh, smoke. How interesting. And then they take another drone down to look at it, and they determine it's there, and maybe that drone can weave its way through, because I watch the Russian drone operators. They have forest obstacle courses, and their drone operators sit there and, steer the stuff through this stuff, and so they steer their drone in there, and there's the poor Leopard crew trying to get their Leopard started up just to keep the engine working, and boom, it's dead. You don't survive as a tank right now. Basically, if you're going to do tanks, for instance, like the way the Russians do tanks, they will shove drones in, slaughter enemy drones, all that, and then tanks will zip in, do the fire support that they need to do for that period of time, and then zip the hell out. Tanks don't hang out on the front line. They don't sit there and cruise around going, I'm a big bad tank, I'm going to blow you up, because here comes the drone and you're dead. That's just the way it works. So, the whole concept of war has changed, and we, frankly speaking, we can't accept that. You go to every single one of the schools where we train our soldiers and Marines, and somebody in there was picking on me because they said something about the U.S. Army in the 1980s. I don't care about the U.S. Army in the 1980s. I wasn't in the U.S. Army. That's their problem.
Yeah.
No, their problem. I was in the Marine Corps. Okay, you want to be critical of the Marines? Come to me. If you want to be critical of the Army? Go elsewhere, baby. That's a different postcode, zip code. They're called loser, L-O-S-E-R. That's the Army. Winner, Marines. Sorry, I just had to put on my Marine hat for a minute. But the point is, we're training people the wrong thing. Even our drone guys, we're so far behind in drone concepts of operation. And it's funny, if you remember how when drones started, one of the first things people talked about was drone swarms.
Right.
Remember that? There can be swarms of drones. It doesn't work in combat. It doesn't work in combat. That's why it's not happening. Because there's jamming going on that. You don't want to put all your, it's much better to have the individual drones coming in, seeking out the target. They can do some AI stuff. But the problem with AI is it's communications. And, people thought, oh, well, if we just create, again, now we get into terms I don't truly understand, but mesh networking. some sort of internet type communication that takes place between drones that's supposed to be impervious to traditional jamming of RF frequencies. Yes, but it's not impervious to jamming of mesh. If you require a drone to communicate with another drone by anything other than a wire, it will be jammed or disrupted. So the drone swarm concept doesn't work. It doesn't. Drone warfare is very lethal, but it's also very hard because there's enemies out there trying to disrupt what you do. So, we don't understand. In the United States, we're like, we're going to bring in, because I've seen the Marine Corps, they're like, we've got this unit. It's on a Humvee. Yay, the Humvee. and it's going to come in, and then they show a whole swarm of drones coming in. And then they push the magic button on the Humvee, and it goes pulse, and all the drones go, tits up and die.
Right.
That ain't how it works, ladies and gentlemen, just so you understand. There ain't going to be a swarm of drones coming in. And how long does it take to recharge the pulse generator? So now I'm fighting the pulse generator, and I send in my drone, and I come in high. I want them to see me, and they go, boop, 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 boom, and my drone dies. Tits up, dead. And now my other two drones come in, the ones with the fiber optic wires that I held in ambush there sitting on the ground, pop in, bang, bang, dead. Another one comes in and cleans up the troops as they try to escape, and 4 drones and this magic weapon's dead. Drone operators are really, the only way to defeat a drone operator is to kill a drone operator, which is what the Russians are doing, people. I've been telling you this for a long time now. The evidence is starting to come out. If the Ukrainians move, they die. And unfortunately, to launch a drone, you have to move. You have to get out of your little underground cavern and walk out to the drone launching place and put the drone down. Now, you can try and do it cleverly, like stick your arm out. I saw the video of the guy doing that. He thought he was being clever, stick just his arm out. Well, the Russian filmed it. Why? I'm watching the film. He sticks his arm out, sticks his arm back in, and then he goes off to big. A couple minutes later, 3 FAB 500 glide bombs come in. These are the big boys. They come in and go boom, boom, boom. There ain't nothing left of the drone operator. You won't be able to find anything. There's not even a shred of it's all gone. And the Russians are doing this to drone operators on a daily basis. When they're not doing that, they have deep reconnaissance teams coming in and slitting their throats. Because you know what you don't want to be when you get captured by the Russians? The Ukrainian drone operator who's made movies of killing Russian soldiers who are trying to surrender or taking prisoners out and doing the snuff film. You see, the Russians record everything. I know. I talked to them. They have it. They have everything the Ukrainians do. And the moment the Ukrainians do something like that, the Russians identify the unit, and using their intelligence, they get the unit roster. And believe me, the guys at the front line know. They know. Now, I'm not justifying this because it's a war crime. I'm just telling you what the reality is. Ask the Georgian drone unit, the one that went into Kursk and sat there and made videos of them killing not just, Russian soldiers who were wounded pleading to be saved. No, they killed them. Oh, but they hunted down old men, they got women, they got children, they videotaped it all. Now, the Russian infantry overruns their position. And there's about, a score of these Georgians. And they show them surrendering, and they're sitting there on the ground. And then the Russians pulled their cell phones, the Georgian cell phones, and started going through the videos that these guys were sending to their family members and everything. And as soon as they saw what these guys did, killed them right on the spot. That's what's going to happen to all of you Ukrainian drone operators because you're all criminals. I would prefer to see the Russians arrest you, put you on trial, and then execute you. But when you make a video of hunting down an old man trying to escape with his dog, which they've done, or the old woman with her 3 grandchildren, killing them, which they've done, including a wounded grandchild trying to crawl away from the dead grandmother, having a drone come in just to kill that baby, you're all going to die. Not me saying, I'm not condemning you. I'm in no position to condemn you. I'm just telling you what the truth is. And right now, the Russians are taking it to Ukrainian drone operators, which is why they have to recruit women. They're out of men. And it takes a long time to train them. I mean, you remember a while back the Ukrainians in their infinite wisdom, because they always have to say how good they are and how wonderful they are. So they created a school for drone operators. And they put a whole bunch of drone operators there along with their Western trainers. And they graduated. And they announced, we're graduating on this day at this place. And they all got together in the auditorium. And then they went outside for the class photo. No shit. Class photo. And they're all out there. And the Russians went. boom, killed them all. Entire class wiped out, gone. And the Ukrainians were like, well, we don't have any drone operators. These guys are supposed to go out and be our drone operators. So they had to recruit new ones, and now they're all dying. It takes a long time to train a Ukrainian drone, to train a competent drone operator. A long time. Minimum 4 weeks just to get out of the schoolhouse, to get into the field. Then another 4 weeks plus learn how to operate. And then you got to learn how to survive, because if you just throw them into the front line, they don't know how to survive. I told you the story about the guy that was sitting there in his hide spot, drinking his water. He's supposed to get up and walk over and put the water in the trash bin, because you can't leave anything behind because the Russians will detect it. And he sat there and he got lazy. He was cocky. He's about 12 days into his 14-day rotation. And he's like, I've been alive. I've been launching drones. I'm good. And he, tries to Michael Jordan it, or Larry Bird it. And off the rim, bounce, 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 spins outside the coverage. The bottle's spinning, and the Russian drone operator goes, oh, look, a spinning bottle. I wonder where that came from. And then they reverse engineered it. 5 minutes later, Iskander missile on the site, killing everybody. That's just the way it is, ladies and gentlemen. The Russians are killing everything. Now, the Ukrainians are pushing fresh troops in. They have a lot of drones, and in some areas, it's created a problem. You still hear Russians go, it's a tough day today. A lot of Ukrainian drones fly. But all that means is that Rubicon, which is the elite Russian anti-drone unit, will come in. When I say anti-drone, I don't mean shooting drones down. I mean killing Ukrainian drone operators. And Rubicon comes in and takes control of the situation and kills everybody. And then there's no longer a drone problem. And Rubicon's expanding in size. They right now have between 5,000 and 8,000 operators. Ukrainians aren't killing them in large numbers, and they're getting more. So pretty soon Rubicon won't be a fire brigade going from point to point to point, but Rubicon will be assigned to each sector, and their job is to eradicate everything. It's a tough war, there's no doubt about it, but what we're doing in the United States, we don't understand. And here's the other thing too, when we do send personnel forward to learn, because we do, I know we don't like to admit it, but ladies and gentlemen, we do have American military personnel on the ground in Ukraine who are attached to these units, learning, trying to get firsthand combat experience about how the Russians fight, to bring that back so we can train. But there's a difference between learning. Imagine if I got attached to a Russian drone unit that's been in the field now for a year and a half, and all of their guys are experienced drone operators. They're out there doing their thing. I'm getting to see very experienced veterans do their thing. Now you're the American that gets attached to the Ukrainian drone unit. Well, it's a brand new drone unit because everybody died. They're brand new and they don't know what they're doing. They're just straight from the schoolhouse, and they get out in the front lines and they die. What are you learning? Nothing. And so we're taking the wrong lessons back. We're frankly learning from the wrong side. If you want to learn how to do drone warfare, don't do it with the Ukrainians because they're losing. Do it with the Russians, but we can't because they're the enemy.
Yeah. From the looks of the way things are going on the battlefield, it appears to me Slavyansk, Kramatorsk may be either encircled or broken down. At that point, I don't think we can never put a timeline on anything, but it looks like the end is near for the Ukrainian strong points in the Donbass area in eastern Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that?
There's 3 cities. I'll try and get them right. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk. I think it goes Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, and then another one down here.
Druzhbovka or whatever that one is.
It begins with a D.
Yeah.
And this is the final urban defensive belt. This is it. When this falls, and it will fall. I think this morning, the advanced Russian units were 4 kilometers outside of Slavyansk, 3 kilometers outside of Kramatorsk, and I think they're operating in the easternmost suburbs of City X. Not only that, but they're also outflanking, coming in, cutting off lines of communication. I mean, it's just not going well for the Ukrainians. Timeline, like who knows? But what I can tell you is the Monster is a Jewish-owned company, Scott. I don't give a flying rat's ass. I'm thirsty. I need caffeine.
Exactly.
you come up with a better option. It used to be Diet Coke, which somebody told me was a Jewish-owned company too. But the Diet Coke gave me my caffeine. I'm out of Diet Coke. This was the only thing left in the store. I bought it. If you don't like it, turn the TV off.
Exactly.
I got a lot of work today, and I need caffeine. But the I don't know where I will. Oh, the belt.
Yeah, Slavian, you were talking about
Russia's advancing. Again, the Ukrainians, let's never forget that they are a professional army. I mean, they're actually the second best. Scott read me. Yay, Mitchie, you're awesome. I should turn off the comments, but I don't. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, honey. But the Ukrainians have a professional army, and they still have some units that are staffed with professional soldiers. And these professional soldiers know how to fight. They put up a battle. And so, you can't expect everything. If you guys, again, you guys, study history. I studied history. It's an interesting thing. The German military in April of 1945 was getting thumped by the Red Army. But the German military in 1945 still had the ability to launch counterattacks. As the Battle of Berlin was unfolding, and you had, Zhukov and Konev coming in and fighting, and Hitler's going to commit suicide and everything. Over on the southern flank, the Germans launched a counterattack. And the idea was to drive a pincher into the rear of, I think, of Konev's army and threaten the supplies. And the Germans actually punched a hole in the Soviet lines and recaptured a German town, liberated it from the Red Army. And then we're talking about like early May, they're doing this. And they're beating the Reds. They're beating the Soviet army. The German troops that were doing the fighting were hands down professional soldiers. They had tanks that ran out of gas, but the tanks worked because they were maintained by professionals. This is in May 1945, when in Berlin, you have Hitler Youth running around getting slaughtered because they don't know how to fight. On the Western Front, you had the Volkssturm out there getting slaughtered. But on occasion, you had a unit that was composed of hardcore combat veterans. Steiner, I think it's Steiner in Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic. In Prague, he was defending Prague. They actually continued to defend Prague up until like May 11th, May 12th, 2 days after Victory Day, the surrender in Berlin. But the Germans kept fighting in Czechoslovakia and fighting and inflicting horrific casualties on the Soviets. And there was over 1 million German soldiers in this army.
Wow.
That was retreating. 1 million German soldiers and this is the defeated German army. The defeated German army had in Czech Republic 1 million guys that were advancing, fighting, trying to make it to the United States. This is the reality of war. Ukraine today is a very large army, very large army, the largest in Europe, because we don't call the Russians Europeans, I guess. And it's the most combat hardened army in Europe. They have more combat veterans than any army in Europe. They know how to fight better than any army in Europe, except the Russians across the board. But my point is, we're sitting here talking about them losing a battle. They are. They're losing a campaign. They're losing a war. They're fighting like hell. And they've got some very motivated units. Again, I'm not sitting here singing the praises of the Waffen SS. Never will. But if you don't acknowledge that the Waffen SS had some, determined fighters who were willing to fight to the death, and these are guys who had survived repeated battles on the Eastern Front and knew how to fight. And if you let your guard down, they would kill you up until the last day. This is the reality of the Ukrainian military. So even though you and I can sit here and rightfully say that, the Russians are putting pressure and they're moving here, there, and everywhere, the Russians are up against a very determined foe, who, let's put ideology aside, they're basically fighting themselves in many cases. Again, the story from Bakhmut, where Wagner surrounded a squad of Ukrainian soldiers in the basement, and there was no hope for these guys. They were going to die. And the Wagner guys called down and said, "Hey, brothers, you did great. You fought bravely. There's no reason for you to die. We will treat you honorably. Surrender. Come out. You've done your duty. Come on out. And the Ukrainian soldiers shouted back, Russians don't surrender. The Ukrainian soldiers, why? Because they come from a culture. That's a war cry that came from the Second World War. As the Germans were advancing, there was and he wasn't even a Russian. I think his nationality was something different. But when the Germans said surrender, he said, Russians don't surrender. And they killed him. So the Ukrainians that are fighting right now, many of them are just Russians. They're called Ukrainians, but they're Russians. They have the same mindset, the same stubbornness, the same, toughness. And so this is a tough war. This is a very tough war. The Russians are doing better. The Russians are winning. But the notion that this is easy, it's never going to be easy. And up until the very end, whatever Ukrainians want to fight will fight, and they'll die fighting. Just like these Germans up in April, May, when we're thinking about a defeated German army. You know what the bloodiest month for American forces in Europe was? It wasn't D-Day. It wasn't June. The invasion, you would think that would be a pretty bloody month, right? Oh, God, you're coming over the beach, getting slaughtered. No! How about, Arnhem, all the paratrooper assaults and all that stuff in the Netherlands? Nope. Battle of the Bulge, that was a tough one, because the Germans attacked us. They actually overran numerous regiments who surrendered and were slaughtered. That had to be very, very bad for us. Nope, wasn't December, wasn't January 1945. The bloodiest month for the United States in Europe was April 1945, the last full month of the war, when the Germans were defeated, getting their asses handed to them. But they fought like dogs, and they fought hard, and they killed more Americans that month and wounded more Americans that month than any other month of the conflict. And so anticipate this. When the history of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is written, and all the data is in, there will be a chapter that talks about basically the defeat of the Ukrainian army. And there will be a part of the chapter where the Ukrainian general crawls out of the basement and comes over and signs the unconditional surrender document as Krebs. Well, Krebs was offered to do that by Chuikov, but Krebs didn't, went back and committed suicide. The next general came in and did it, Keitel, I think. But when they also write that story, before we get to the part where the Ukrainian crawls out of the basement and surrenders, there will be a whole bunch of that chapter about the last Russians who died. Nobody wants to be the last person to die, but I'm going to tell you right now, the Russians will lose more soldiers in the final phase of the fighting against Ukraine than they have since maybe Bakhmut, because it's going to be desperation fighting. It's going to be the horrific kind of fighting. And that's just the way it is. Russia's going to win this war. There's no doubt about it. Russia will win it sooner rather than later. There's no doubt in my mind about that either. But the notion that this is going to be an easy fight for Russia, that this is going to be a cakewalk, not even close. This is going to be the hardest thing these Russian soldiers have ever done. And what they're doing today is very, very hard.
Well, as the person who does a lot of fishing, and when people are fishing and the fish, you've got a big old, sport fish of some kind, a 20-pound striper, and man, he's all over the place. And you have your drag set so he can pull it out, right? And here's where people make their mistake. The fish gets closer and closer, and they see the fish, oh, there he is, and they tighten up their drag. That's when you break your line. Because when that fish gets close to the boat and he sees that boat, he's like, holy crap, there's a frying pan up there waiting for me, right? That's when, he's all over the place and the fish appears to be getting tired and you're starting to bring him in. And then when he comes up and he sees that boat, he turns, boom, and he makes the sign. That's when he goes for it, right? That's when it's like, holy crap, I'm out of here. And it's like that second wind, that last burst. I ain't going out without a fight. That's when they break people's line. Right before they're like, I got him. Pow, he's gone, right? If you don't leave your line, your drag loose so he can pull it out. My point being, it makes sense because just when somebody realizes, holy crap, you can be tired, and these troops are worn down, they're tired, they don't have enough food, and it's like, holy crap, we're going to get wiped out. You get that second wind and give it all you got just before you go out in a blaze of glory, as they say. So that makes sense with the nature of a fight is that just before someone's defeated or the animal's caught or whatever, they're going to do everything they can. So it makes sense to me that, yes, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk are surrounded, but I would expect those troops, number one, to fight like hell, number one. And number two, then I think that you're going to see troops move towards crossing the river, crossing the Dnieper. You know, whether it's, I don't know which town they go after next, but I think they're going to cross it because they're going to, and that's when things are going to get really decisive, and it's dangerous for what stupid things could happen, you know, from NATO. But I think that's what happens next. They go to cross the river. You know, the Odessa, the ports are closed down. Those people in the world are deep in serious trouble, I think.
The problem is, you know, Russia has a military that's appropriately sized for the mission that it's been given. People need to remember, Russia never sought to occupy Ukraine.
Right.
Wasn't the goal, wasn't the objective. The Russian forces that came in early on in the conflict were insufficient to the task, but they did do what they were supposed to do, which was to basically punch out of Crimea, secure a foundation in Kherson, which they captured in its totality, and then push across to join up with the forces from the Donetsk People's Republic to create a land bridge that connected Crimea with Donetsk with Russia, and then, you know, seek to liberate all of Donetsk, all of Lugansk, and then compel the Ukrainians to surrender. They had supporting operations taking place around Kiev, Chernihiv, Sumy, again to suck Ukrainian forces away from the Donbass. But getting the Donbass was their number one priority. And we know the Russians, it's in their first treaty, the Istanbul Communique, we're going to give back everything but the Donbass. When the peace treaty was signed, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Chernihiv, Sumy, the territories north of, were all going to be given back. And we know that this was the case because the Russians agreed to evacuate the northern part as a show of good, you know, good faith. To say, you know, here's a confidence building measure. You guys don't believe we're going to withdraw? Here, we're withdrawing. And then, thanks to NATO, the Ukrainians took advantage of that, launched a surprise attack. That everybody said, look how good the Ukrainians are. Well, you can be really good when your enemy has withdrawn 50% of their troops and the other troops believe that there's not going to be an offensive and you hit them, okay? So same on Russia. So what Russia did at that time was mobilize 300,000 troops. That was enough to stabilize the front line. And Russia's not done in mobilization since then. There's no need to, because Russia is recruiting, you know, 20, 30, 40,000 troops a month that are getting trained and sent into the special military operation, and they've expanded their operation. Initially their phase 2 operations was singularly focused on recapturing the Donbass. This is what we saw the fighting in April, May, June, even July. And then what we saw is the counterattack that came in the Kharkov region and et cetera, down in Kherson. And the Russians had to withdraw, consolidate. 300,000 troops came in, stabilized, and gradually they built up additional forces. You saw a couple new army groupings come together, and the Russians now are launching a full court press. Russia went from, say, 200,000 when the war started to about 500,000 when with the mobilization. And today the Russian forces are in the theater between 700 and 800,000 troops in the theater. They can recapture the Donbass. This is their mission. People need to understand. Their primary mission right now is to recapture the Donbass. The secondary mission is to push and get Zaporizhia. No one's talking about the right bank of Kherson right now because that requires a huge push. You got to cross a river and the logistics involved and all that. They can move in and get a buffer zone in Dnipropetrovsk, which they're doing right now, and Sumy, which they're doing. They may open up another front in Chernihiv. There's a lot of talk about Russian troops, 300,000 of them massing in the Belarus area. But the bottom line is to make a push beyond the Dnieper River to get into Kherson, to threaten Odessa. You're going to need 300 to 500,000 more troops. And I don't see, if you're talking about a full-scale offensive, I don't see the Russians having made that decision yet. I mean, there's a lot of rumors out there that after the September election, that the Russians are moving in that direction. But, you know, I don't know. I don't think so.
Again, the weather starts to change then. That's when you start.
Well, I mean, even if you mobilize, though, you'd mobilize at that point in time to have them ready for the spring offensive.
Right.
You know, you're not going to mobilize in the spring because again, these guys got to be equipped, trained, organized, and rolling. So you'd want to mobilize in September, October to have them all trained up. But that's sort of what they did with the 300,000 last time. It was at the end of September, I think, that Putin announced the mobilization of 300,000, and they mobilized, and then they started training, and the troops started arriving on the front to stabilize the front. And they put together the most recently discharged troops who required the least amount of training were put together in units and sent in replacement units. Then the other ones, they had to actually run you through cycles. You have to get trained and get confirmed before you're sent into the front. So they didn't have these 300,000 deployed until early in 2023. And then these units were used effectively to blunt the Ukrainian counteroffensives in Zaporizhia and also up in the Bakhmut area. So it would be the same thing. I think if you were going to be trying to take Odessa this spring, you would see 300 to 500,000 troops mobilized in after the election. But the Russians are saying they're not going to do that. But the other option is you don't need to do this. The other option is to go for collapse. I think this is the direction that the Russians are heading right now, is that they're seeking this winter for the total societal and political collapse of Ukraine. It'll begin with the end of Zelensky. We already see Zelensky's on the way out. He's the most hated, reviled man in the world right now. And the Ukrainians despise this guy, openly despise it. He's surrounded by corruption. People have lost faith in him. The West has lost faith with him. And I think you're seeing right now there's a big push to get Zelensky out. Now, they'll replace him with a Zelensky clone, meaning it'll be another Banderas-loving son of a bitch. But once the system is shown to be corrupt, and it'll just immediately cycle out, and then you're going to see total collapse. And I think the Russians are pushing for total political collapse in Ukraine by the end of this year or early next year. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to be a Ukrainian politician when the people are starving and frozen and have no hope. And that'll also impact the military. Understand that there will be the Rasputitsa, which is the muddy season coming up. When that happens, of course, it's very difficult to maneuver and move. But after the Rasputitsa comes the frozen time. And then things move, and the Russians will be in a position then to, continue their offensives throughout the winter period. And I think you're going to see a lot of movement this winter because the Ukrainians won't have the capacity to move forces to, fire brigades require fuel to drive vehicles. There won't be any fuel. There won't be any vehicles. There won't be any drones. You know that the Ukrainians shot through their defense budget, right? You saw that. They allocated $54 billion for 2027. That's a lot of money for a country that size. And that's not the totality of it. That's just the sustainment stuff. So it's supposed to be $27 billion in the first half and $27 billion in the second half. And then Zelensky is told by Fedorov, we're going to do this big drone warfare thing. Zelensky went, great. And Fedorov said, so we're going to build a lot of drones. And Zelensky went, great. And Fedorov went, okay, I'm in charge of drone building. Zelensky went, great. And Fedorov went, all right, because I'm a corrupt son of a bitch, I'm going to push all my drone production to Firepoint, this singular company composed of 3 people who know nothing. And they provide me a drone design provided by the West, FP1, that's going to charge me $55,000. But you got another drone company in Ukraine, Patriots, who said, hey, I could build the same drone for like $5,000. $5,000. I'll charge you $5,050. I'll make $50 on it. I'm joking about the 50, but I mean, I'm telling you, their profit margin was small because they're patriots. They want to help their country. Firepoint is not a patriotic company. Firepoint is a fraudulent front company to make money. And Fedorov pushed 60% of the drone production to Firepoint, and then took the $27 billion meant for the second half and spent it all up front, believing that he would win some sort of drone war. So now the 40-day drone war is announced, and it putters out, and now it turns out that Ukraine is out of drones. I mean, they still have some, but there was a period where they were launching 1,400 of these FP1s, over the course of a 3-day period. 8 of them hit their targets. Just work on that math for me. So It's not very effective. But now they don't have any more money, so they can't buy more drones. And they don't have any more drones because they used them all, because they bought them using the money from them. And this is the reality of Ukraine right now. They're bankrupt. They need Europe to give them 30 billion euro right now to pay salaries, to buy stuff. And here you have Zelensky at the same time telling people, I need patriots. But don't worry, I'm not asking you to give them to me. I'll buy them. I'll pay for them. With what? With the 30 billion you're going to give me. So don't give me the missiles, but give me the money so I can buy the missiles. I mean, this is just all a scam. It's corruption. But this is bad. Then the last thing about Ukraine and what's going on today that people have to factor in is there's this big push now to mobilize women. Why? Well, they're out of men. They don't have any men. Now, why is this a big deal? In the first half of 2026, Ukraine registered 74,000, just short of 74,000 live births. Look, as a new grandparent myself, there's nothing better than a new life coming into this world. Little baby, bouncing baby girl, bouncing baby boy. Awesome. 74,000. They haven't been corrupted with banderism yet, so they're still pure. But they recorded 280,000 deaths. Now, that's what they recorded. First of all, that bad news is that's a 4-to-1, a 4-to-1 exchange rate, which means that you're not replacing anything. You need a 2.1 to have replacement over time. 2.1 in favor of deaths. They don't have that. They're one birth, 4 deaths. But that doesn't include hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who are listed as missing but are known to be dead. So now the real factor is 6 to 8 to 1. Guys, this is extinction. This is extinction level event. In 2025, it was 1 to 3. So for every live birth, there were 3 deaths. Again, not counting in the hundreds of thousands of soldiers. And this is a ratio that's been in place since this conflict began. And remember that Ukraine was depopulated right off the start by, lost over half its population by people fleeing the country, and also the vast majority of people fleeing the country, by the way, fled to Russia. People only talk about that. And then also several million becoming Russian citizens because now they're part of Russian Oblast, Lugansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. But the Ukrainians that are left, they're down to less than 20 million. They're dying off at an unprecedented rate, and they're not replacing them. And now the Ukrainians are saying in order to stay in this fight, it's not just the Ukrainians. We have Keith Kellogg, an American lieutenant general out there talking about women fighting, talking about the combat capabilities of his daughter. She